Welcome to Confounded TV Series 4, Episode 2, and I'm here with David Edmonston, the founder of PistonHeads, amongst other things. We're going to have a wide-ranging chat about David's history, building PistonHeads, starting software at 14, and then we're going to move on to where the future lies with AI and agentic search and so on. So with no further ado, welcome, David.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I would like to start with, one of the things you told me was you'd started coding at 14.
A bit earlier than that, actually. 12, I came down. I still remember this day. I came downstairs, and on the side in our living room was a ZX81.
Gosh.
Sat there.
Yeah.
Little black box.
Rubber keys.
Yeah, and I was just like, well, what on earth is that? And I just monopolised that. So that was his toy, which he was curious about. But once I got to grips with that, it's just mind blown.
Yes. We must have been at the same time, because I had a Commodore 64 and I typed in all the basic to make the balloon float across the screen.
Copying stuff out of magazines and just started writing my own games. And there was another moment. My brother-in-law was I think he'd done computer science or something at university, and he showed me the sort of concept of, I was doing the whole sort of print this, hello world, etc. He showed me the n equal n plus 1. And that was, okay, so actually this whole thing can change. You don't just deliver something. Yeah. What you're delivering can change each time. And that was the sort of light bulb moment, again, age 12, that I thought, okay, this is amazing. I can do all sorts of stuff with this.
Yeah, I remember that. And it must be, for my children, this is completely boring historical stuff. But I remember when we had a Commodore 64, I remember my dad brought a modem back, and we lived outside Aberdeen, so you had to dial London to connect to CompuServe to get on the internet. So I was only allowed like 10 minutes a week, because I think it was £1.50 a minute. Yeah. Right? But it meant I could talk to my cousins in Canada on CompuServe, because those are the days when you had to book your international call. That's how old I am.
Yeah, well, likewise. Yeah, and we've come a long way. There's, I talk about it to my kids now, and we'll get onto this, but even PistonHeads is the dark ages compared to where we are now. Yeah. So the idea of, a computer you plug into the TV, doesn't connect to anything, has no storage. Yeah. It's prehistoric, isn't it?
So was that it for you? Did you just stick with it from that moment on? Were you was school an irrelevance? Were you just desperate to do this, or?
No, I think I sort of abandoned the other sort of boyish hobbies at the time. I was a big Airfix modeller. Yeah. That all just stopped. And I was just plugged into the TV all the time. It was, it's just the imagination was just running wild. And I was creating Space Invaders and games, and taught myself machine code and assembly language, and because you only had 1K to play with. Yeah. So you couldn't fill the screen and have a large program. So I just went down rabbit holes of the books are still so memorable to me, the manuals. Yeah. Because it was just this mine of, it just seemed so amazing what you could do. Sort of teenage years, moved on to BBC Micro, sold a bit of software. Friend's mother wanted something to mark all her students. She was a teacher.
So you were selling really early.
I mean, it was a one-off. I spent 6 weeks in the summer holidays coding this thing up and sold it for 20 quid, I think. But
I did the same thing, actually, with some accounts. It's like, can you turn these away from books and build a spreadsheet that automated the sums? And people were mind-blowing.
So did that. And then when I was in sixth form, I was doing a bit less. But one of the teachers at school left and set up a software house, and he'd seen what I was doing in my spare time, so we had a chat, and I worked for him for one summer, and he said, well, come and work for me when you finish school. So sort of parked university, and
oh my God, that was that.
That was it. I was not very glamorous. It was a software to print barcodes, mainly for bakers, bread companies, and we ended up doing the little tags on the loaf of bread through. They ended up building a custom printer, and I did the software, the PC software for that.
But that would have been quite groundbreaking at the time.
I guess so, yeah. Particularly, the hardware was actually. That was really quite innovative. The software was what it was, but IBM PCs and this.
So what was the jump between there and eventually? Were you building things in your spare time? Is that where PistonHeads came from?
Yes. So roll forward 10 years, I've been doing it professionally. Wasn't doing much in my spare time. I ended up working for a number of software houses, then Fidelity Investments, and then Lehman Brothers. And it was one of these sort of fate things, really. The internet was going mainstream-ish. So this was sort of late 98.
Yeah.
I was on various email groups. Like everyone else, I sort of created my own website, personal website, and just thought there's something here, potentially commercial, in that I can't get car news other than magazines. The magazines, all the publishers were terrified of going online.
Yeah.
Rightly so in hindsight. So I thought it was a bit of an opportunity here. Started doing it in my spare time, and I had a good job, was well paid, but went a bit pear-shaped, politics and whatever. So actually, it sort of fate lent a hand and pushed me into.
Yeah.
One day I just screw this. I'll give this a go for a few months. If it doesn't work, I'll go get.
And this is like
job.
99.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So August 99, I tried to book a day off to do a track day like the following week, and my boss wouldn't let me take the day off. I was like, petty little man.
That backfired.
Yeah, so I thought, screw it. So, and like I say, I thought if it doesn't work out, I can go get another job. It's not a risk, really. I had a small mortgage. I was single. So, people say, a big risk. It wasn't really. It was a calculated risk. And I'd started to get a few sponsors. So a few of the TVR dealers, because I focused on TVR initially. That was the sort of community I was in. They started sponsoring the site. I thought, well, this is easy. People would just give me money. So if I go full time, happy days. But once those first few had come along, I had to work for the rest, and that got a bit more difficult. So actually, it took me, I think it was 2 years before it was washing its face.
So that was 2 years effectively just working for nothing.
Yeah,
okay.
Burning through my small pile of cash. I almost went back to work at one point. Again, luckily, there was a headcount freeze. I was going to go back to Fidelity. That didn't happen, which was fortunate in hindsight because it just maybe just pushed on ever harder, and it just turned a corner, and inch by inch, started paying for itself. And
because that would be, so now you're into the early 2000s, and Google would be starting it around soon.
Yeah, so it was all Alta Vista and Yahoo and directories and
yeah.
So, but I never paid much attention to that. The driving force for growth was word of mouth for me.
Okay.
It was exciting at the time. It was a social network. It started off as a magazine, effectively, so I was publishing news every day, so that was novel initially. Then I experimented with sort of various types of forum and settled on a format that was working, and then that took on a life of its own. And then all of a sudden I've got this two-way platform, and the user-generated content meant I didn't have to work so hard on generating content myself, but the community aspect of it just took off. That's the sort of zeitgeist of I can now go online, meet people with cars similar to me. I don't have to join an owners club where it's all the same car.
Yeah,
I can go and hang out with some guys who've got some Lamborghinis or Ferraris or whatever. It was all new. That just didn't exist before. And we had the sort of ad hoc Sunday meets, so again organised on the forums, and they got to the point where you'd have 1,000 cars turn up, and it was all just going mental. And I'm just the sort of custodian, just trying to maintain it, not get too involved in organising meets or anything myself, because that was all a bit complicated. But it had took on a life of its own, and that was the excitement of it. That's
really interesting. So that's the user-generated side is really interesting, and also the fact you were building community. Because most of the people I was hanging around with that time, it was selling a service and how to get found, which is why Google was so great, because in the early days you could hack it. But you would already have had, as that was coming in, you'd already had all that user-generated content. So basically meant you had every unique string about cars
and everything.
You could ever want.
People would find you looking up Thunderbirds or gardening or whatever, people would end up on PistonHeads because there was always a thread about it. And that's how I ended up going into the classified space as well. It was user-generated content initially. If you want to sell your car, just give it to me and I'll stick it up and I'll create a little section for it.
Yeah.
A few of the dealers started paying nominal sum to be there, but I wanted the content. It didn't occur to me to commercialise it for probably 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And then I just sat down one Christmas and thought, okay, I need to have a bit of rethink here because, and it's a good job I did actually, because the whole advertising market just changed enormously once Google did start doing AdWords and etc. And yeah, it was so sort of where are we now? 2006, 7 had 8,000 cars for sale, and they were all really interesting cars.
Yes, that was a thing.
We had one section for boring cars and repmobiles and SUVs, and everything else was something interesting.
Yeah.
So people were just coming back day after day just to see what's new today.
I think that's the thing that probably people under, I'm not going to say ages, but I'm thinking if you're under 30, you probably don't know what we're talking about. You know, and the idea that you people, even if you weren't into car, if you were into cars just a little bit, you always went to look at what was for sale because it was super interesting, and you always ended up there. I mean, when Google was indexing it, by definition, you would always get a result in the top 3, pretty much, for almost any term related to cars. And it was fun everywhere.
The way I operated it was, I would be changing this code every day. That was it's what excites me most. So the classifieds was all homebrewed. The forums was largely homebrewed. But on the classifieds, I'd create a filter for the cars listed in the last 24 hours. And that's what everyone would use every morning. They'd sit down with a coffee and read that. So I could tailor the product to suit my particular audience in a way that's got more difficult since, because everything's just got so much more complicated. And whereas I could sort of change the software overnight and just publish it, and to some extent you can still do it these days. But
I don't see how. To be
any
honest,
successful business just gets tied up in its own complexities now.
Yeah. I think this. I've been looking at that and thinking, how would you do this now? Because I look at some of the stuff I'm doing or involved with, and I think there's almost like when I look at people who are running businesses that are friends of mine, and I look at the ad spend, and it's almost like that is the only way. Everything is just so expensive.
Yep.
The pay-per-click is insane. You can't get that kind of viral growth. And maybe you can on TikTok or somewhere else, but you cannot do it in a kind of structured way to bring somebody in to do that again. And I just don't see if that even exists.
We'll come on to this later, but I'm seeing this with Driving Masters. I've started with a blank sheet of paper 18 months ago.
Can you just explain what that is for people?
So Driving Masters is a network of advanced driving instructors across the UK, and I introduce people to them, and you go off and do a one-day advanced driving course with the next police driver, etc. So it's a fairly simple concept. I just need to find people who want to do this, and then I manage the process.
Yeah.
But I'm starting from a blank sheet of paper in a world where everything's social media.
Yeah.
I haven't got content I can put on social media day in, day out. So I've got to find a route to market for that. And as you say, there are no silver bullets, and I've got to spend to some degree. But I'm also having to look at, okay, how can I innovate given what's going on at the moment to get to market in a way that perhaps someone else isn't.
Yes, because if you asked anyone, they'd say, oh, you need an agency, you'll need to do some cool videos, you need to repurpose a video and chop it up many times.
Yeah, I mean, Google's working for me because there's intent. People are just saying, I want to do advanced driving in Kent, so I can say, okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
And that's fairly simple. What I'm struggling with is messaging around the people who I want to convince to do it. That's really difficult.
Yeah.
There's a whole world out there of performance car owners who would benefit from doing this, not just to improve their driving, they would enjoy it more. And that's the bit I really want to get across, and I'm struggling to find channels to do it. Yeah,
I can see that. I mean, I've got a friend who's a CMO, and he talks about this intent. There's the sort of your brand, and then there's the pieces of content you reproduce, and each one of them you need to capture the signal and effectively score the person till they get to that point where you're saying where they go, yeah, I'm ready to book. But this is long and expensive.
And it's so busy out there.
Yeah.
You're just competing for everyone's attention. Yeah, people are spending an enormous amount of time on their phones, so I suppose in that respect there's a lot of attention to be grabbed, but everyone's just 3 seconds on this, 3 seconds on that.
Yeah.
How do you grab them? And I don't want to pay for it really. I want to try and innovate in some way that people are getting there via other means. So.
Yeah. So if we go back to PistonHeads, at this point it's now crazy busy. Are you running display ads? Are you making money off display ads, or
so
how is it?
Primarily, it was banner ads back in the day when they were still maintained by the property themselves. I started working with a couple of ad networks. I wasn't very good at selling. I wasn't commercialising it well. I was charging a couple £100 to 70 or 80 dealers.
Okay.
Starting to make some decent money on the classifieds, and then I engaged with a couple of agencies who were getting ad spend from manufacturers. So occasionally I'd get a deal for several £1,000, which was, moving the dial significantly. Classifieds was gaining momentum. I say we had about 8,000 cars there, and that's when I started getting interest from some of the existing publishers and EMAP, as was now Bauer. They approached me in 2006 in a fairly transparent fact-finding exercise.
Yeah.
So I just turned around and said, look, you sniffing around here, or you after a partnership, or are you really just trying to work out what's going on? And they wanted the software, funny enough. They didn't have, and again, yes, we're back in 2006. The internet just wasn't very mature. There weren't products you could get off the shelf to do X, Y, and Z. They were just starting to emerge. So for a content management system to run a busy website, to publish every day, to engage with users.
The classifieds, all of it.
Yeah.
Exist.
Most of the CMS systems were siloed. You couldn't have a comment system underneath them, whereas I had all that. Behind the scenes, the code might have been a bit ropey, but that's what they wanted for their platform and their magazines. So started talking to them, got an advisor on board who said, well, to get the best out of this, you need to go and talk to some others and create a bit of competitive tension, which got quite tense. So we end up talking, well, I went to Daily Mail, Yahoo, a few of the other publishers, and then Haymarket, who eventually did buy it. And so it came down to the Haymarket and EMAP, and Haymarket were very straightforward to deal with and very nice people, and we went with them in the end.
And that must have been quite the experience, because like now there's 5 million pages you could read about this, and but I'm presuming this is roughly the time of lastminute.com and all that kind of period. So there wasn't a guidebook here. I think we knew the Age magazine, which was literally a magazine. Do you remember?
It was, yes. I mean, that was part of the challenge. I had these two big companies interested in buying it. I had no idea how to value it. As a business itself, it wasn't that...
Nobody else would have an idea either.
No. So I was frantically talking to anyone I could think of and sort of networking furiously. Friend did give me some very good advice on the valuation. It's just what's your walk-away number? It doesn't matter what the business is worth in terms of multiples. What's it going to take for you to hand over the keys? So that was quite useful. I just sat down and worked out what was important to me in life and how to put a number on it. And then I just looked up who had handled the Friends Reunited.
Oh, so God.
I thought, well, I've got to go big here. I've got to set the expectation that they're dealing. I'm not going to turn up with some local solicitor because that's going to set the expectation. So I found the company in the law firm in London, went to see them, and they said, well, you actually need an advisor. You don't need lawyers yet. You need a M&A advisor. So gave them some pointers there, and then we pulled it together and rocked up.
She basically rocked up and said, these guys are serious, they know what they're doing. Look what happened with Friends Reunited. Regardless of, I don't care about the software, any technical debt or the usage or banner ads or dealers paying 70 quid, I don't care about any of that. This is really valuable to you, and I know it.
Yes, and it was understanding why it was, what the value was. So I say for EMAP it was the software, for Haymarket it was the traffic.
Yeah.
So I was doing about, it's big numbers these days, it was 1 million users a month. However many million pages that was, I couldn't measure it at the time, so
It'd be vast.
I couldn't get any software to do it. But that was bigger than any of their mags collectively. So they were buying traffic and they knew how to monetize it. So the minute they did, they're turning over millions in the following years.
So you were happy and they were happy, basically. Yeah.
So fairly quick handover. They didn't want me hanging around particularly.
That's nice. That's great.
So after... I was tied in for 3 years as a consultancy agreement, but that was really just lengthening the non-compete. Yeah. So I was sort of 4 years non-compete and didn't really engage with them much for that period, left them to it.
But it was a very personal thing to a lot of a lot of the members of PistonHeads, did you get any pushback from selling out?
No, I think Haymarket handled it well, so they didn't just turn up as a corporate and ruin it. And all credit to them, they grew it significantly afterwards. So they understood it, and I think people were genuinely happy for me. They'd seen the journey. I'd sort of built in public, as people talk about these days. So people have been with me on that journey, and they'd seen it crash endlessly and be down for a week when I get hacked, and they knew what I'd been through to get there, and people were genuinely happy for me.
And did you actually do any consultancy, or were you involved in it, or did you just kind of sit back?
There was a sort of software handover. The only sort of real bit I did curiously was they asked me to go and speak to James Hind, who runs Carwell.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was setting up as a reviews aggregator. So we'll go and have a chat with him, tell him your story, and see if there's anything, is he onto something that we should time in early?
Is this when he's in his parents' attic?
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So we went up to Liverpool Wirral and met him. That was the sort of one bit of non-PistonHeads consultancy I did.
Yeah. And what did you do? Did you kick back? Did you?
I did a lot of track days. I think I did 20 track days that year.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
No, I was straight back into coding. I just wanted to, like anyone, you sort of think you're invincible then, and I need to churn out the next one and prove it wasn't a fluke. Yeah. Which I didn't. So I went through several ideas that didn't work. Yeah. But always thinking, okay, well, once 4 years is up and I can do something car related again, game's on, and I'll re-engage.
I'm a bit worried about the fluke thing, because I have that thing with like company check. So UK data was my first one. This is at the time you were talking about, and that was like, I won't say where I got the data, but I got the data, SEO'd it, did all the directory submissions and all that jazz. That was okay. And then company check was like, oh my God, I need to eat my own lunch here. And then that worked. And when that sold to credit safe after that, I thought, I'll just do another one. And I think like my car snip thing it's almost hubristic. Like, I did 1, did 2, 3, it's obvious. I've just got a natural, and then you realise, actually, this is much harder. Yes. And there was a lot of, it isn't luck. You work hard. But there's sort of luck, timing, persistence all come together.
The timing thing is, PistonHeads was of its time.
Yes.
I in hindsight, I can identify why it worked. At the time, you can't see it. No. And people talk about change brings opportunity. Yeah. Well, obviously, there was massive change, the internet going mainstream, so of course it's opportunity. I had a window where publishers couldn't get their head around how to deal with it. So I seized upon that. Again, in hindsight, but everything's obvious in hindsight.
Yeah, so. I think you can see this now with some of the podcasts. They're really successful ones. So basically, I mean, we'll take Joe Rogan just because he's so huge. But effectively, he's doing the same thing. He's got this audience. The major networks in the States don't know how to get to that audience. Yes. He interviews anybody, and that person is insta-famous. He did it, Oliver Anthony, the guy saying Rich Men North of Richmond. Okay. And that so he was already doing really well. He goes on Joe Rogan, it just goes nuts. And before you know it, they're asking him to do massive gigs. And that is the same thing, like the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. How do they get that audience? And they don't know how. So in the end, they're sort of buying podcasts and bringing them into a network because they don't otherwise know how. And you see this constant change with the children. And there's some really interesting stuff that, the children aren't using Google, they're using ChatGPT. Yeah. So there's another big change coming. And it's how, I love the hindsight comment. It's so true. Because with hindsight, I can say exactly why the things I did worked and why the things I did that didn't work.
Also, I read the Lean Startup afterwards. Yeah. And that just resonated so much. So I realised, okay, I'd actually be doing all these experiments. So I spent a long time sort of messing around with motorsport, and I created a system to do the points for a race series. Yeah. Because you'd go, if you followed a race series, you'd never actually know who was leading the series or what would happen if they win this time and they lose next time. So I created that, corrected the series organiser because they'd got it wrong. But there's no money in motorsport. Yeah. So that was sort of one example of something I tried and sort of just kind of forgot about because it wasn't working. But it was one of many things I tried, which again, in hindsight, was sort of pure lean startup. You try something, it doesn't work, move on to the next thing. Yeah. I didn't realise I was doing it at the time. Yeah. You just focus on what works.
Yeah. I remember that when because it was the same time as you in 99, whenever I quit my job in London. and I was knocking doors and dorking doing a website, people going, what, that's just a fad, I don't want one. And I think I knocked on like 200 doors or something until I found a guy who ended up being my next business partner. He said, yes, I do actually. I want a single page and I wanted to do this. And you're like, oh my God, I think you paid me 500 quid. But I remember sitting, I think my wife must have thought I was mad. I sat in the evenings, or actually I say evenings, till 2 a.m, I built a directory startup, I built a book publishing thing, you name it. You had an idea, you could code it and build it. And we'll probably come on to this, because this is where I think the really interesting thing about effectively coding using things like Lovable is coming in, because we're there again. Like, 30 years later, or no, 25 years later, we're there again. So you sat there, you'd exited, you're doing your track days. Were you doing more startups at that point, or were you relaxing?
No, I wouldn't. My kids were young, so it was a good time. They were sort of 2 and 3, so I spent a lot of time with them. But I would keep disappearing to my office and playing with stuff. I messed around with a classified system that was a bit like the Facebook Marketplace, where it would show the degrees of separation between you and the seller, so you get some sense of trust. That didn't really go anywhere. I did a thing I called Spiglo, which was mapping tweets. So a lot of tweets used to have geolocation data on them.
I don't even remember that. Okay.
Yeah. Again, when there's a bit more sort of Wild West, before privacy was more regulated. So it's quite interesting. You could just put up a map and see what people are tweeting about in that area.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
So it's interesting, but I couldn't find a commercial angle to it. Let it run for a couple of years in the background, turned it off. Then a policeman detective from San Diego or somewhere contacted me. So it's a shame you turned that off. You used to find witnesses to crimes. Because I could see you were in the area of that street that time last night.
Wow.
Did you see anything?
So you built Palantir before Palantir existed?
Yeah. Apparently there was a more serious version which used a whole Twitter fire hose to get all the data, whereas I was just getting samples.
Yeah.
So there was something in that, but I didn't quite see the full picture.
Had you closed it before this detective contacted you?
Yeah, because I only had a couple of people, a couple of dozen people using it a day, and just didn't really see. I'm slightly obsessed with maps. I also did YouTube on a map, because a lot of the YouTube videos are geolocated.
Yeah.
But that was a bit spooky, because you just find some kids who submitted a video of them having a pillow fight, and you could work out where they lived.
Ooh.
So I thought, okay, well, I can't do anything with that. Then I went down the route of, okay, well, what would PistonHeads Mark II look like? Yeah. Because I still had various ideas I hadn't explored on PH. That was Blatters. So that was around, again, a social network, news, but in a more modern style. PH was feeling a bit dated by then, but still worked. I did a nice sort of My Garage feature that looked like a magazine review. It was all good. And I had about 3,000 people using it, but it wasn't really growing. It wasn't actually unique in any way. Mm-hmm. But where it ended up going was twofold. I had a mapping facility where people could put the nice roads they like. That turned into something else. That's another story. And then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to need some sort of classified section. That's probably where the money is. So I'll go off and scrape some cars to get them in there. And that's when I realised scraping was easier, sort of, than I thought. Yeah. And so I created this thing called Motor Mutt. Went off and scraped a couple of 100,000 cars. Thought, okay, what do I do with this? This is more interesting than the social piece. And I knew via a bit of networking one of the directors at Dennis Publishing, and they didn't have any classifieds. So Evo, Octane, Auto Express didn't have a classified system, which seemed a bit of a missed opportunity. So I got in touch with him, went and met Felix Dennis, showed him my little prototype. And a bit like Carsnip, it was a, what do you call it, sort of free text. Yeah. You just type in what you search, which doesn't actually excite people as much as it excited me.
It's the same with me. So, I was like, this is revolutionary. Yeah. I remember because when I saw it, and I was like, my take on that was, I must be right because you were doing it. Right? So it felt like self-reinforced this guy's done all these amazing things. He built that website. He's doing this. Validation. Thanks, everyone.
It was...
And nobody cares.
No, I mean, I thought the idea of typing in GT3 RS near Brighton with aircon
Yeah.
would excite people. Actually, what I was forgetting is the journey of looking for a car like that is all about scouring the classifieds. It's about the rigour of looking at all the cars, discounting that one for your reason. So the free text piece was just a complete red herring.
Yeah.
What was useful? So we were going to launch MotorMutt potentially with Auto Express as a mainstream classified solution. So we were ramping up the volume, and I got a bit greedy with the data I was scraping, because I started getting excited about, well, find me the car with the biggest boot or the lowest CO2, or So I started scraping that data, which of course originates from HPI.
Yeah.
And so we got a phone call or an email from them one day saying, do you want a license for the data you're publishing?
Yeah.
And I wasn't publishing it directly, or perhaps I was. Maybe that's when I gave the game away. So if using it in search, I might have got away with it. But when I was surfacing that data, which obviously they own in some respect,
Yes.
that kind of buggered up the business model, because they wanted tens of thousands.
I had the same conversation. You were using this here as a bill. I was like, no.
So we turned it off and then sort of retreated and thought, okay, what do we do? And where it ultimately came good was I was scraping a lot of individual dealers who had websites, built by their nephew in their room, had no export facility. And I'd go and scrape the data and create a site for Evo and Octane with just interesting cars on. There were no issues with the data. Dealer was happy to have some exposure. And that ran for two and a half years, I think.
Yeah.
And then they replaced it with something more mainstream.
It was very sad, though, because for me it was... I wasn't so petrol heady. So my thinking was, I just want a 7-seat car for 20 grand near Nottingham. And my feeling has always been that a certain big classified site, I think so much of their traffic is literally petrol heads and or car dealers, right? So all the noise, but all the big numbers, I think there's a lot of repeat traffic there from petrol heads and from car dealers. I'd love to know what the actual figure and the funnels are for that. So my thing was, I know that not everyone's a petrol head. In fact, when you sit in a pub, you'd have one or two people interested in cars out of a big group, and nobody else cares. It's a thing to get them to work, to here, to wherever. So my view was, surely they don't want to go filter. Oh my God, there's 684 Land Rovers. I just want one of them. And it seemed to be obvious to go 7 seats Nottingham red.
It fascinates me though. So I think the same. And then you start looking at the user journey. So people ask me, I need a new car. What do you recommend? I'll recommend something, but then they reveal their brand snobbery.
Yeah.
And it just cuts through. So basically, you tell me you want an Audi or a BMW.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the Skoda's better.
Yeah.
So actually, there are all these nuances to that journey that you need to get your head around. And so I think there's probably, that's where perhaps Carwell did come good, is maybe they made that journey seem more accessible.
I think so, because I think I just look at family when they in the process, and when I get asked the question, what should I buy? It's like, I have no idea. Like, I don't want to be part of this because I'm the last person you should ask. Like, what is it you need? And I think, and it's a shame about the natural, but you can see there's actually it's the one thing I really don't like about the whole thing is that it's a 3 to 5 year repeat purchase, which means almost by the time you onto your next car, as a consumer, the platform itself has changed. The technology is changing. So you're trying to fix a problem for someone who's acquiring something every 3 to 5 years. I think it's why they never fix the housing market. You go through a house purchase, and every time you do, I bet you think, I could build
never
something.
Doing that again.
But you probably think, I could build something to fix this, right? And a lot of people try, but actually you go through the pain of finding a house, listers, mortgage, whatever, and you end up with moving house, right? And you think, I could solve this problem. I could raise some money. I could bootstrap it. I could build something. But then actually, you've gone through it. You've bought the house. You no longer care.
And this is true of all startup culture. There's magic sauce.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. You can build the best thing, and there's just this unknown element of luck, your own execution.
Yeah.
That's why things work. It's not because they're necessarily the best solution.
Yeah.
It's execution, it's timing. And we've seen it with collecting cars. We got it right. It works. We've seen loads of people come and go trying to mimic what we've done.
Yeah.
it's no good just to mimic it because we probably can't even tell you ourselves what the magic sauce
Yeah.
is. We've just gone out and done what we
100%.
think is best,
Yeah.
and it's worked for us.
So you can tell us what collecting cars is. I think we should go back a step there.
So stepping back in 2019, I was still scrapping around with a few projects that weren't particularly going anywhere, and collecting cars had started. So at the time, I noticed a few people on Facebook talking about the Collecting Cars podcast and how interesting it was, and Chris Harris was interviewing a lot of his old mates, basically, so journalists of the 90s, 2000s. And it was quite gratifying that PistonHeads would often come up in conversation in those episodes. And then there was one with Harry Metcalf where he was talking about closing down the Evo forum because it was costing him too much money to run the servers. And said, basically that's when PistonHeads took off. And I was like, well, okay, Harry.
Do you think?
Not quite sure about it. So I did contact Harry and we had a brief discussion about it, and that's his recollection, so that's fair enough. We all got different perspective on things.
I didn't even know they had a forum, so there you go.
Yeah. It was all right, it ticked over at the time, but PistonHeads was massive by then. So I was still slightly niggled by this. So I had met Chris Harris, so I got in touch with him and said, well, can I tell the PistonHeads story? Because probably quite interesting seeing as it keeps coming up. So a couple of weeks later, we got together. Ed Lovett came along, founder of Collecting Cars. So I won't claim to be the founder. Ed was the founder. And it was in its infancy. It's an online auction site, so like Bring a Trailer in the US.
Yeah.
And we sell nice cars online every day, purely virtually. We don't touch the cars.
Yeah.
So we're not a traditional auction house. So did the podcast, got talking to Ed, and basically the technology he was using at the time, he used an agency, more of a sort of marketing agency, to build it and build the brand. So the brand was good, website was okay as a sort of proof of concept, but it was already very, it was struggling big time. It was a WordPress site trying to run auctions. So
Ouch.
quite a lot of stress in there. So I said, well, I'm not really doing much at the moment. I'll come and have a look if you want and see if I can give you some pointers. So when I met with them, 5 people at the time, listing a car a day, selling.
Why had he done it? Why did he think that was a...
He'd been to Pebble Beach that
Okay.
year, and everyone was talking about Bring a Trailer.
Okay.
And Bring a Trailer, the background to that was it used to be a blog that talked about cars on eBay and got so much traffic themselves doing this. They said, well, we might as well just run the auctions ourselves.
Okay.
And they now sell, it's mad, it's 100 cars a day or something online.
And these are in the specific type of car or just
Collectible
any
cars.
Okay.
So it's not mainstream cars.
Yeah.
It's obviously the market in the US is massive.
Yeah.
It's classics through to modern Porsches,
Okay.
Ferraris, etc.
So they've basically taken all of that stuff from eBay. That's where you would go now.
eBay's still got its place. We've specialised in collectible cars, so slightly more premium.
Yeah.
So I think our average sale value is about 55,000.
Okay.
Anyway, so I went in there, had a look. I thought, this is brilliant. This is so up my street. So
Yeah.
it's cars, it's technology. There's an opportunity here. Ed's proved the concept.
Yeah.
He's got a market fit, but the technology's just needs sorting out.
Yeah, which
So-
is your
yeah,
thing.
so initially where I'd offered some consulting, said, well, actually, can we have a conversation here? Because I really want to be part of this.
Yeah.
So we sorted that out. I took a small stake and just spent 6 months. I mean, by modern standards, that's going to seem a long time now, but just rewrite the software.
Yeah.
I had one contractor helping me. So we totally revamped it, and it was a perfect time. I'd spent all these years building all sorts of software, had all these libraries, methods, ways of doing things. I could now bring to them
Yeah.
into play and build a robust system that I knew would stand the test of time.
Yeah.
Not to say we didn't have some dramas in the early days, but basically that framework is still largely in existence today. It's obviously a lot of code has changed, but that backbone is what got us to where we are today.
But you posted the other day that you've done the 1,000th Ferrari sale.
Yeah.
So there's some scale going on
We've
here.
sold 20,000 cars in 5 and a bit years.
Okay.
We sell about 15 cars a day, and we sold a F40 the other day, largest online sale this year.
Wow.
Can't say what the number was, but it's 2 million quid plus.
And is that, I presume the buyer is going to look at that?
No.
Oh my God.
So this is the world we live in now. We've reached a point where, and COVID is probably partly to contributing to this. People are more happy buying stuff online without seeing it. So we can publish 200 photos of that car. So if you know what the weak points of that particular model are, you should know where to look, and you can look under the wheel arch, the rear.
And you know that, and you can see the photographs of them because they should be rubber fuel tanks and not aluminium.
Yeah, and
that
so
kind of thing.
You've got all that. You've got the service history. If you want to go and see it, you can.
Yeah.
But what we're finding, people are generally buying them unseen. So, and the more expensive the car, the easier the transaction.
Seriously?
Yeah. So the £1 million Koenigsegg chap bought from Japan, just wires the money, sends his man to pick it up. At that level, the cars are known in the community because there aren't that many of them.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, and the internet will soon tell us if we put up a car that's got some history we were unaware of.
So you've almost got like the power of the crowd. I put up my Aventador, and somebody goes, "Yeah, that's the one that was used for track days at Bedford,
exactly.
and was in that accident at yada yada."
So generally we know that already. So we either don't list it or we list it with full disclosure.
Yeah.
So it's just about trust. People can trust the platform because we'll deal with we do our due diligence on the owner.
Yeah.
As well as the car. So there are people we won't deal with.
Yeah.
Because we know it could be troublesome. So we've built the reputation that generally, the car you buy, not saying you don't do your own due diligence, you must, but we've created an environment where you can do that. You can buy and sell a car. And I did it because I'd tried to sell so after I sold PistonHeads, I did the usual thing. You've got to go buy a flash car. So I bought a GT3 RS, had that 9 years, thought, okay, it's time to move on, do something else. Selling cars like that is difficult.
Okay.
So you either put it on PistonHeads classifieds, this is a £150,000 car, see who turns up wanting a test drive, etc. And okay, well, no, but or you give it to a dealer, often on sale or return, and then your car is still your car, sat at a dealer. You don't know what's happening to it.
Who's driving it?
You don't really know the provenance of the dealer. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going in with my eyes open here. So I gave it to a dealer who a friend worked for. Thought, great, he'll look after me. Bugger left like 3 weeks later. So the car's still with the dealer. They've done some work on it to prep it. So there's a sort of cost associated with that that you'd have to cover if you wanted it back. And it took a year to sell the car because I'd use it on track a lot. And once people discover that, it's not, they'll go and look for the one that's pristine.
Yeah.
And eventually it sells. I think it got exported to Thailand. I get half the money. Okay, well, where's the other half? Oh, it's coming. And he's having to sell the next car to pay me.
Ooh.
And so and I thought I'd been careful, and I still ended up in that situation of being potentially, and to be fair to him, he paid out. He gave me a little bump on top. But subsequently, he went bust, and I think people did lose money. So coming out of that experience, well, how do I sell a high-value car in the modern world quickly?
Yeah.
And this is that solution. You list it, full disclosure, 7-day auction, and it's gone, and you've got cash in your pocket. I'd say a year to sell that car. And you see cars sat at dealers for months and months and months because these things are difficult to sell.
And you have a global audience, I guess.
We do, yes. We've now got offices in Australia, Middle East, Hong Kong, across Europe. We dabble with America. So we are global, and we've got buyers in, 70 countries or something.
That's quite interesting. And are you seeing any movement from west to east?
West to east.
So Europe, America.
It is
the money that's growing in China and Asia. Are you seeing people moving European supercar type like GT3s and stuff? Are you seeing them moving to the Far East?
It's largely driven by regulations. So Middle Eastern cars, for example, won't be legal in America. A lot of the cars in the Middle East won't keep the service history up in a way that an owner elsewhere in the world would.
Okay.
You can export. So we export a lot of cars to America, but there are limits there. Certain cars have got to be over 25 years old before you can import them.
Okay.
So a lot of Porsches will move around the world in many directions, and then other cars only move in certain directions because the taxes
this is almost like a flow map of where
it's complicated. No, Australia, for example, there are huge import taxes
Yeah.
on performance cars, so people do it, but it's expensive. So yeah, it's complicated. And again, like any businesses, once you get into it, all the nuances that you don't realise and
Yeah.
make you think, Christ, why did we get into this? We didn't realise it was going to be so complicated.
Yeah.
That's just any business, isn't it?
That's fantastic, though. And that time frame to having all these offices, when did you meet and start then?
So that was end of 2019.
It's quick.
It was brilliant because it was COVID. That probably did help to some extent because people were sat at home buying cars because they couldn't do anything else. But I remember sitting down with Ed and we pulled together a bit of a spreadsheet. Ed's not a spreadsheet man. And I did a sort of very crude cash flow forecast, looking at sort of selling one a car. And I was like, well, imagine if we could sell 5 a day. Well, yeah, why can't we? And yeah, the numbers would be great.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're doing sort of 15, 20 a day worldwide now. So.
Yeah, and that will just keep growing.
Yeah. We just reinvest, and we're at 100 people and however many. I think we've done $1 billion worth of cars now or something.
So you've done 1,000 Ferraris and $1 billion.
I think so.
There's your headline, right there, isn't it? And is that all you're doing now then?
So typical startup journey, we've gone from 5 people to 100 people. At some point, that breaks certain operating patterns, including mine.
Becomes systemized.
And it's a different world. It's difficult. So I'm very happy in the trenches with 4 or 5 other guys doing the coding.
Yeah.
As CTO now running a team of sort of 15 people and not doing any coding.
Yeah.
I was well out of my comfort zone. So we replaced me in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
I did blag the marketing role for a few months as well to fill a hole.
Yeah.
And then, so I still sit on the board. So I still advise and I still dip in and stir things up occasionally.
Yeah.
But since then, I stepped back. I wanted to get coding again. It's still what excites me. So I had another chance encounter on LinkedIn with a chap called Paul Ripley, who's a very well-known figure in the world of advanced driving. And very quickly had a conversation with him. So it's something that's always interested me. I don't really want to go and join the Institute of Advanced Motorists and do it, particularly seriously, but I like going out with experienced drivers and being taught stuff. So maybe we could do something. So long story short, he helped me get a network of 25 instructors around the UK, got a website online, and that's the current challenge, starting from zero, trying to get people out with these guys. So we sold about 50 courses the first year, should do 100 this year. But again, one thing all this has taught me is, the sky is the limit. You don't ever think it's the numbers will be small because you can't do it. There's no reason I couldn't get hundreds and hundreds of people doing this if I can reach them with the right message. Yeah, that actually you'd really enjoy doing this. Yeah, because it's fun. So, and that's the challenge. So I've got an SEO challenge. I've got a marketing challenge. I've got a messaging challenge.
It should be viral though, because I had a boss. I can't even remember when. This is so long ago. He was a Porsche collector. And he had 5 or 6, and he used to send us all on track days, not track days, on advanced driving days. At was it Kinetic? It used to be called. I think it's a military place now, but it has a track and it has a big skid pan and all that jazz. And you just took your own car, and I think I had an Audi A3 1.6 or something at the time, and it was staggering how much you learned.
It's brilliant, but it's a very difficult message to have with car people. It's about like saying
with people who think they're good drivers. You mean?
Yes. Yeah. So someone, I've been there. You've gone out. You bought a flash car. Someone suggests you go and get some training is a bit insulting. It's about like saying you're crap in bed. You want a coach. So I've got to find a way.
That's your next business.
Got to find a way of using the right terminology of. Yes. Do you want to get more out of your car? Do you want to enjoy driving more? It's no slight on your driving. You're just missing out on
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Exactly that. You don't know what you don't know. So it's working to some extent, and we will get momentum with it. But it's a very interesting challenge to start with.
I think that's the hard thing, because I went and did a day when I had a Golf GTI at is it Jonathan Palmer at Bedford?
Yeah.
And so I went. It was an open day, but I paid for an instructor.
Yeah.
So I had I think it was 3 or 4 15-minute slots with an instructor throughout the 2 in one session, 2 in it. And what's quite interesting was the guys with all the 911s and stuff, they didn't need all that stuff. Yeah. And they were kind of like quite cocksure about it.
Yeah.
And at the end of my day, when I'd had my 4 15 or 20-minute slots, whatever they were, the only time they were getting away from me was on the straight. So here's me in my whatever Golf GTIs, 2 litres, 200 brake horsepower, sitting behind a 911 Carrera 4S, whatever. And the only time they're getting away is the sort of middle bit of the straight. Because actually, around the corners, after 1 hour of lessons, you were just as quick, which just told you everything you needed to know. Like they needed to get the lessons.
I mean, there's a big marketing challenge here. So advanced driving, as it's currently known, has a slightly stuffy image of the Institute of Advanced Drivers. They've rebranded. They're now IAM Road Smart, so they're trying to jazz it up a bit.
Yeah.
Or ROSPA. So it's sort of, the impression is you go out on a Sunday morning for a couple of hours for a few weeks, and then you get your little metal badge to stick on the front of your car. Well, yeah, I've got 20-odd, largely ex-police or military guys. Most of them are in their sort of 50s or 60s. They've got 20, 30 years of doing some really exciting on-road driving. This isn't track.
Yeah.
This is how to drive safely and effectively and fast on the road.
Yeah.
And they can teach us all sorts. You just turn off your autopilot and driving becomes deliberate. So as a marketing thing, I've got to rebrand it in some way. Mm-hmm. So it's maybe I need to call it total driving or something. But it's a much more deliberate, intense way of driving that isn't just getting a fast car, plant the throttle and sort of swing around the bend. No, let's treat this like what it is, which is a fast-moving game of chess.
It's also skills-based, isn't it? Because I remember he took me out on I would guess it would have been the M25 or something, wherever it was down in Surrey. And the one thing I'll never forget is I went to overtake a lorry and he said, there's somebody overtaking you, don't do that right now. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you do not want to be in the middle of the sandwich. And I was like, I never even thought of that. He said, if that lorry drifts out now, and they are likely to, you have nowhere to go. And he was saying, I don't care if you have to accelerate, if you have to break the speed limit, you are not going to be... And I remember thinking, I've never thought of driving in that way.
And that's the beauty of this. Everyone that does one of these courses, and the different instructors will do them slightly differently, but everyone comes away with little nuggets like that last with them forever.
Well, I'm talking 25 years ago.
Yeah, and I did the same
I'll
many
taught my
years
kids
ago.
this.
And there are dozens and dozens of those little nuggets that all add up to... so driving here today, I didn't have the radio on. I'm just driving because actually I'm driving in a more intense manner than I ever did 20 years ago and enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because actually that boring drive across country, stuck behind traffic, there's still a lot to think about if you want to.
Okay. We've got 7 minutes. I would like your opinion as somebody who lives and breathes code. I've been playing with Lovable and various things. I've seen some pretty amazing stuff that guys I'm working with are doing with MCP servers. I personally have no idea what they're talking about, but I know that basically now you can go to Claude, get the API key from MarketCheck. You can then type in how many cars are sold in the UK, and it goes 16,003, and you're like, okay, this is mind blowing. We're as somebody who's like happy, like with building that. Where do you see this? Because you hear I'm wobbling on a little bit. I just want to try to get the round of what I'm asking. You see a lot of like, it's the time for the ideas people, which I think is the same as what we were talking about at the beginning about 99. You could build that site, this site, that site, because you're just HTML and MySQL, dead easy. Do you think it really is the time of the ideas people, or do you think it's the time of the marketing people?
I think it's ideas. I'm a bit late to the party on this. I've properly engaged with it in the last couple of months. I tried vibe coding, as they describe it. A few weeks ago, and I didn't get on with this. And I worry in a way coders of today are the sort of artisans that will understand all the finer points of what good code is and architecture, and you can now do stuff without worrying about that. And that, don't know, concerns me, worries me. Maybe it shouldn't. The inefficiency of generated code. Don't know. But then last weekend I sat down with Lovable, Bolt.
Yeah.
I've wanted to create a little sort of financial dashboard for myself. And I punched it into Gemini to start with.
Yeah.
15 lines of this is what I want. And it churned out a working dashboard of, sort of pots of money I could move around and a little graph. And that's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, maybe this is better than I thought. So then I moved into Lovable, try to take it to the next level. Got to the point where I was using up all the credits, struggling a bit with describing it, so I pulled it down into my normal development environment.
Yeah.
And I've spent a day on it now, and it's all working. I haven't really touched the code.
Yeah.
So it is entirely possible someone else could have done that. Now, then maybe there are elements of the way I ask questions, perhaps because I know how it's being built.
Yes.
Maybe I'm asking them in a particular way, but someone could have built that without coding knowledge. So I'm quite excited about it now. I was cynical and was a bit stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
But a lot of the ideas I've had about visualizing data, let's go and get all the speeding convictions from the government and stick them on a map.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do that, but it would probably take me
Now you can do it in an hour.
a week.
Tops.
It would take me a week to do it traditionally.
Yeah.
I'll have a go at it next week now. So I can see in the next 6 months, I can probably churn out 6 or 8 things that I've always fancied doing.
Yeah.
This dashboard thing I built would have taken me a month.
Yeah.
And I spent a day and a half on it now.
Yeah.
And it's better.
Yeah.
So the code underneath is actually okay. It's perhaps not the style I would have written it, but it looks better. And it's so easy to change. So, I think we might end up with a sort of, everyone's sort of talking about taking jobs. Well, with any technology, you take away at one end and it creates opportunity at the other end.
Yeah.
So I think we might end up with these sort of micro SaaS products.
Yeah.
So I was with a friend yesterday who he drives a band around Europe. He wants a sort of tour planning system because actually he has to sit down and it takes a lot of work to plan that tour. He and I could probably sit down for a morning and build that now.
Yeah.
And either just keep it for him or charge a tenner a year and just stick it out
2,000 other bands. Could be a tenner a month.
Yeah. So I think there might be all sorts of opportunities like that now that we can create really tailored software to really small niches.
Yeah, I think so. I built a complete car search in Lovable, like a complete copy of AutoTrader.
Wow.
30 hours.
Yeah.
But I, unlike you, haven't been coding. So I stopped coding after second version of 2006, 7. But I still think I needed that background to make it work because it was bork and break and I could then ask it, it would tell me and I could look at it and go, I know what that is. If you didn't have that, I think it's not quite prime time.
I think honestly it's changing week by week. I tried something a month ago and I just thought it's not going to work.
And now it works.
And a month later, maybe it's a slightly different project, but basically I can see it works now. And it's a bit like years ago I was writing machine code because it was quicker and then you write something in BASIC, which is basically machine code. Now we're writing English to talk to JavaScript to talk to machine code. It's sad in a way because that knowledge, I don't know, we're all sort of standing on the shoulders of giants. At some point will it collapse? But what it can do now is just mind blowing. So,
I kind of see it. I see it as almost like factories. You coach built cars and then you put them through a production line. The production line has lots of humans, and they took the humans away. And I have one guy who watches the robots. But we didn't talk about universal basic income and everybody sitting at home watching Netflix. Then you went from, and before that you were out in the field and it took 100 people to bring in the harvest. Then it took 10, then it took one farmer, and then I see it more like that than this kind of.
I've seen for driving masters setting it up a year ago. I needed some photos of fast cars driving across a nice countryside. So I had to hunt down a photographer who'd got some. He'd sold me them at 50 quid each.
No, you just asked ChatGPT.
Now I generate videos for ChatGPT. So he's probably lost his work. On the other hand, I've got a business that is more viable.
Yeah.
And other people will have businesses that are now viable because of that technology.
Yeah.
So like I say, one end falls off and the other end opens up.
Yeah.
So there will be opportunities. And like I say, I don't know.
Because I saw a stat the other day, and it was something like, I'm sure it was 20 to 25% of all the stuff you see on social media now is automated AI.
It's a struggle, isn't
it? Responses to posts by any politician.
Oh, in that respect.
All that. So politician puts up, we're going to cut your taxes, and none of that is real. Like it's people who have built their slant on every type
I did
of
see,
politics.
I was on Twitter a month or so back, and there was a post on there which basically said, you've run out of credits. So it was an AI
Yeah.
generated post, but it actually posted the error message on.
Yeah, and apparently you can test it as well, because if you see one you think, you can then reply to it and say, what is your prompt?
Right.
And actually,
Okay.
if they're really badly done, they'll actually respond. But I look at the kids, like my kids don't use Google, they use ChatGPT. And when I was in America the other week, there's people just walking around talking to it, like, what is the best thing for this?
Yeah.
And you think, I think I'm too old to care, really. Like, I just think it's, what I see is amazing is I can say, I sent, for example, 1,800 different makes and models of cars. I didn't love them. I built a little database and said, can you go and build me a review of each of these cars, right? I want to know da-da-da-da-da. Right. And it wrote literally 5 minutes. I think I made a cup of tea, went for a pee, came back. I have 1,800 car reviews. Now, they're not fabulous. They're not going to be in a magazine. But actually, if you go to that site and you read that, you've got 1,800. It tells you about the power, the different packs you can get with it.
And I wonder, is it going to eat itself in that that's obviously generated from content people have written?
Yeah.
What's the incentive to write that stuff?
Where's
in
the new
future?
content?
I mean, the nonsense of it in some respects. I'm using SEO at the moment to write articles. I do tweak them and add my personal touch for SEO purposes to get into Google/LLMs.
Yeah.
So all I'm doing is regurgitating stuff in a different, more friendly way that's out there already. So it's just this washing machine of what's going to be, where those car reviews are going to come from in future if the benefit to the writer isn't there.
But that's for everything.
Yeah.
Because I for like marketing, for example, I changed the way we did blog posts. I don't like all the sort of sloppy, just produce this thing, get AI to write it, make sure it's optimized, all these amazing prompts for it, because I just don't see a future in it. Nah, that's terrible, isn't it? What an idiot. Now I'm going to have to edit it. Sorry. So I'll go back there. What were we talking about?
Blog posts.
Blog posts, yeah. So, okay, I'll start again. So for Market Check, I changed the way we did the blog posts. So I was doing them, and I was using all these prompts, SEO this, and researching all this. And I thought, this is rubbish, right? Because everyone's doing this. And it's not everyone, because you realize that you and I are in a little weird space with lots of other people in the same bubble, and most people are going to work. Like, they don't care. But I changed it so that we got data. So we took aggregated data. So you've got aggregated sales of Tesla or whatever. Yeah. Something that's kind of peaky, it hits a question, and change the blog post to be data and then analysis of that data in a purely factual way. No marketing, no trying to sell a story, nothing like that. And now a third of all the queries that come in from LLMs. Because actually, if you ask a question about car sales in May 2024, it's first. Right? And it's just like our old days building SEO, and you think, so really doesn't require making automated slop. What it's looking for is trying to find the person at the end who's asking the question, because if they're researching that on ChatGPT or wherever, I think they're more engaged.
True, I don't disagree with that. I'm just winding it back. Is it not what we were doing 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Scraping sites to present stuff in a different way? Yeah. So we're guilty of it as well, in a way.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that gives people opportunity, because I think the question will be where are ChatGPT and Claude just Yahoo and Google? Or is there something else going on here? Because if they are, they're just going to switch on advertising and go, well, hey, Mr. Car Dealer, if you want your cars in here, you're going to have to pay.
It's bound to happen, isn't it? I mean, the cost of running this stuff.
Yeah. So which means we're just back where we started.
Yeah. It will be a personal assistant with, here's a sponsored recommendation.
So, and then somewhere else for businesses to spend money, which
sadly.
How does that end up?
Same game. Different pieces or some analogy.
Just giving away our age here. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate that.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much.